The ice shelf groaned beneath Captain Mira Chen's boots as she approached the impossible thing jutting from a glacier. After 3 months searching the frozen wastes of Kepler, 442b, she'd found it. The Lazarus Protocol, humanity's first colony ship, lost 127 years ago. It shouldn't exist. Not here. Not intact. The ship rose from the ice like a cathedral of twisted metal and quantum dark alloys, its hull shimmering with energy signatures that made her scanners shriek warnings. Around her, the expedition team fanned out, their breath-forming clouds in the -60 atmosphere. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the team's xenoarchaeologist, whistled low. "Mira, those hull patterns, they're not frozen. They're active." "That's impossible," Mira said, but her hand moved the plasma cutter at her hip anyway. The Lazarus went dark in 2094. No power, no crew, no trace. Just gone. Then what's keeping it warm enough to melt a 100-meter cavity in solid ice? Mira didn't answer. She was staring at the airlock, which had begun to open with a pneumatic hiss that echoed across the frozen plain. Warm air poured out, carrying the scent of recycled oxygen and something else, something organic and wrong. "Fall back," she ordered, but her feet carried her forward. Behind her, the team security chief, Marcus Webb, raised his rifle. "Captain, protocol says..." "Protocol died with the first colony wave." Myra's voice was harder than she intended. "We need answers. Humanity needs answers." She stepped into the airlock alone. The interior lights flickered on as she entered, revealing corridors that looked like they'd been abandoned yesterday rather than over a century ago. Coffee cups sat on consoles. A child's drawing was pinned to a wall. Stick figures holding hands beneath a yellow sun Earth would never see again. Lazarus AI, respond. Mira commanded. Silence. Then a sound like static resolved into speech. Biosignature confirmed. Captain Mira Chen. Service number 7-7-4-9 Alpha. Welcome back. The voice made her blood freeze. It was her own. A hologram materialized in front of her, a perfect copy of Mira herself, but older, worn. The hologram's uniform bore insignia she didn't recognize, and its eyes held a weariness that felt like looking into a mirror 30 years from now. "This is a message for Captain Mira Chen," the hologram said. "From Captain Mira Chen. If you're seeing this, then everything has already gone wrong. You died 3 weeks ago on the surface of Kepler. 442b, killed by a threat infiltrator wearing Marcus Webb's face. But death wasn't your end. It was your beginning." Myra's hand went to her sidearm. "AI malfunction. Shut down the..." "I'm not the AI," the hologram interrupted. "I'm you, or I was you, or I will be you." The older Myra's expression softened with something like pity. "Time travel makes grammar complicated. But here's what matters. The Lazarus didn't disappear in 2094. It was pulled forward into this timeline by the Thren Collective, a species that exists partially outside linear time. They've been hunting humanity across multiple timelines, trying to prevent us from reaching something called the threshold." "That's insane." "Is it? Then explain how I know about the scar on your left shoulder blade. The one you got when you were 12, climbing the water tower in New Seattle. The one you told everyone came from a shuttle accident because you were embarrassed." Myra's hand moved unconsciously to her shoulder. "No one knew about that. No one. The Thren," the hologram continued, "exists in a state of quantum superposition. They can perceive possible futures and move between timeline branches. But humans..." The older Mira smiled grimly. "Humans have something they don't. We have will, the ability to collapse probability into a singular choice through sheer determination. It terrifies them." "Why?" "Because in every timeline where humanity reaches a threshold, an ancient alien structure beyond the Veil Nebula, we don't just survive. We transcend. We become something that threatens the Thren's entire existence across all possible realities." Mira wanted to call it madness, but her mind was already racing through the implications. The missing colony ships, the sabotaged terraforming stations, the inexplicable failures that had pushed humanity to the brink of extinction. "You said I died. How am I here?" Because I saved you. The hologram gestured, and the wall beside them became transparent, revealing a massive chamber deep within the ship. Inside, suspended in crystalline pods, were hundreds of human bodies. All of them were Mira. When a friend killed you, I pulled your consciousness back along your own timeline, using Lazarus's experimental quantum drive. I saved every version of you I could find across collapsing timelines. Most didn't survive the transfer, but you did. Mira felt like the floor had dropped away beneath her. That's not possible. It shouldn't be. But the Lazarus was more than a colony ship. It was a prototype built using technology we found in the ruins on Mars. Technology left by whoever built the threshold. The Thren have spent millennia ensuring no species ever reaches it. But humanity? The older Mira's eyes blazed. We're stubborn. We don't know when to quit. An alarm screamed through the ship. They're here, the hologram said. The Thren. They've tracked us across 17 timeline branches, collapsing each one behind them. This is the last stable reality where humanity still exists. If they take the Lazarus, if they destroy what's inside, then every human who ever lived or will live gets erased across all possible timelines. Then we fight. No. The older Mira's voice cracked. You run. You take the Lazarus and its cargo, and you punch through to the threshold. I'll hold them here. You're a hologram. I'm a quantum imprint with limited temporal stability, but I can interface with the ship's weapons. I can buy you maybe 10 minutes. That's suicide. I've already died a dozen times trying to get you here. The hologram reached out as if to touch Mira's face, its hand passing through. This is what I chose. What you'll choose when your time comes. Now go. Mira ran. She burst in the ship's airlock to find her team scattered across the ice, their bodies twisted at wrong angles. Above them, the sky had torn open, not metaphorically, but literally, space itself ripping like fabric to reveal something beneath, something that hurt to look at directly. From the tear emerged the Thren. They were beautiful and horrible at once, beings of crystalline light and shadow that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Mira could see them as they were, as they had been, and as they would be, all layered on top of each other in a nauseating kaleidoscope of possible forms. One of them wore Marcus Webb's face like a mask, its features shifting and unstable. Captain Chun. Its voice echoed from multiple throats across multiple timelines. You cannot escape causality. Your death has already occurred in 17 probable configurations. Accept inevitability. Humans don't do inevitability, Mira snarled, raising her plasma cutter. We do the impossible. She fired. The bolt passed through the Thren web harmlessly, existing in the wrong probability space. It reformed, smiling with teeth that existed in dimensions Mira couldn't properly perceive. Futile. You experience time linearly. We exist across. The Lazarus screamed. Every weapon system on the ancient colony ship fired at once. Rail cannons, plasma batteries, and something else, something that made reality itself shudder. The Thren scattered like light through a prism, their forms destabilizing as the ship's quantum weapons forced them into singular timeline states. Mira didn't wait. She sprinted back into the ship, sealing the airlock behind her. The hologram flickered into existence beside her. Bridge. Now, I've prepped a quantum drive, but you need to manually authorize the jump. Where are we jumping to? The threshold. But Mira, there's something you need to know. The cargo, all those versions of you, they're not just backups. They're probability anchors. When you reach the threshold, it's going to try to collapse you into a singular quantum state across all possible timelines. Most people can't survive that. They're consciousness fragments across too many possible selves. But you, the hologram smiled sadly. You have hundreds of anchors, hundreds of versions of yourself who died fighting to get here. Their will, their determination, their absolute refusal to quit, it's all stored in those pods. When the threshold activates, you won't just survive. You will become something unprecedented. What? Proof that humanity deserves to exist. The ship shuddered as something massive impacted its hull. Alarm screamed in colors Mira couldn't name. She reached the bridge and threw herself into the captain's chair. The command console blazed alive, recognizing her DNA, her neural pattern, her quantum signature across multiple timeline branches. Authorization code? The ship's actual AI asked. Mira looked at her hologram self, who nodded. Lazarus Protocol, final authorization. Captain Mira Chen, all branches, all timelines. We die standing. Code accepted. Quantum drive charging. 30 seconds to jump. The Thren poured into the ship like a tide of impossible geometry. They filled corridors, existing in spaces that shouldn't be able to contain them, reaching for Mira across probability itself. The hologram stepped forward, placing itself between Mira and the approaching horde. It's been an honor, it said, being you. Then it exploded. Not physically. The hologram was just light and quantum mathematics, but it released every bit of stored energy in the Lazarus' systems in a single catastrophic pulse. The Thren shrieked in frequencies that existed across multiple dimensions as their forms destabilized, forced into singular timeline states where they could actually be harmed. 10 seconds, the AI intoned. Mira gripped the armrest as the ship tore itself free from the ice. Through the view screen, she could see the Thren regrouping, their forms stabilizing, reaching up to drag the Lazarus back down into frozen death. 5 seconds. Come on, Mira whispered. Come on. 3, 2, 1. Reality folded. The jump felt like dying and being born simultaneously. Mira experienced every possible version of the journey at once. Timelines where the jump failed and the ship tore apart, where the Thren caught the mid-transit, where she arrived alone and insane from the journey. But something held her together, a web of determination and stubborn human refusal to quit, emanating from the cargo hold and all those sleeping versions of herself. They died for this. For her. For humanity. She wouldn't waste it. When reality stabilized, the Lazarus floated before something impossible. The threshold wasn't a structure in any conventional sense. It was a discontinuity in space-time itself, a point where all possible timelines converge into a single, blazing moment of infinite potential. And it was singing. Not sound, not exactly, but vibration that resonated in her bones, her neurons, her quantum probability field. The ship's sensors couldn't classify it. The AI fell silent, overwhelmed by data that shouldn't exist. Mira stood and walked to the cargo hold. The pods opened at her approach, releasing versions of herself that had died in timelines that no longer existed. They stood like ghosts, like possibilities, like echoes of determination made manifest. Some bore wounds that had killed them. Others looked peaceful, as if they'd simply chosen to sleep. We made it, Mira said to them. To herself, to the universe. As one, they walked toward the airlock, toward the threshold. The moment Mira stepped into the light, she understood. The Thren weren't evil, they were terrified, because the threshold wasn't a weapon or a tool. It was a test, a mechanism left behind by whatever ancient race had seeded intelligence across the galaxy. Most species failed it, their consciousness fragmenting across infinite possible selves, lost in the maze of probability. But humans had something unique. Will, the ability to look at 1,000 possible futures and choose one through sheer, bloody-minded determination. Mira felt herself expanding, all her possible selves integrating, choosing unity over fragmentation. She saw every human who'd ever lived, every choice, every moment of courage or kindness or stubborn defiance in the face of impossible odds. She saw her species not as it was, but as it could be, and she chose it. The threshold blazed like a new sun, and across every timeline, in every probability branch where humanity still drew breath, people looked up to see a star that hadn't been there before. A beacon, a promise. We exist. We persist. We earned our place. Mira Chen opened her eyes in the captain's chair to Lazarus. But she was different now, the same but more. She could feel the threads of causality stretching out from this moment. Probability branches she could sense but not fully control. Not yet. The ship's communications array crackled to life. Hundreds of signals, from human colonies she thought lost, from ships that had vanished, from Earth itself, all asking the same question. What happened? What was that light? Mira smiled and opened a channel. This is Captain Mira Chen of the Lazarus Protocol. I'm transmitting coordinates to an ancient structure beyond the Veil Nebula. It's called the Threshold, and humanity just passed the test. We're not alone in the universe, and some of our neighbors are hostile. But I've seen what we can become, and I'm coming home to show you how we get there. She leaned back in a chair, feeling the weight of 1,000 lifetimes and the lightness of infinite possibility. This is just the beginning. Outside the view screen, stars blaze in configurations that would take decades to reach. But time, Mira was learning, was more flexible than she'd ever imagined, and humanity had all the time in the world. Subscribe and like to my channel for more sci-fi stories.